Hello, and thank you all for attending our live fireside chat on supply chain manufacturing. My name is Ellen Waugh, and I will be moderating the conversation today. With me is Ken Schrock, Director at Spalding Ridge, and Kyle Rich, Associate Partner at Spalding Ridge. Both are leading experts in our supply chain practice, and today we'll be discussing the importance of connected planning and why it is critical for your business. Kyle and Ken will also give insights into the pain points supply chain is facing right now and the tools and methods your organization can use to stay ahead. All attendees are muted. If you wish to ask a question, please do so in the question box below. We will answer all questions at the end of the session. All right, let's begin. First question is to you, Kyle. What's your view of supply chain now, and how has it changed since starting at Spalding Ridge?
Yeah, and first and foremost, great to be here with the audience here and with you here, Ken, talking through, what supply chain's looking like today. And so, I spent my whole career in supply chain, similar to you, Ken, and I really haven't seen anything like we're experiencing today. And so, early in my career, within supply chain, but also here at Spalding Ridge, a lot of what we were seeing were, companies trying to figure out ways to strategically reduce their inventory. So, it would be, how do we get a better demand signal to our supply team? How do we reduce the frequency that we place purchase orders, or, how do we find ways to reduce our SKU portfolio? So, what a lot of things companies were doing was, because they didn't have that accurate demand signal, having to consistently buy more inventory or produce more inventory to make sure that we were covered. And today that's really completely flipped. You can't open your phone today or order a appliance, watch the news without seeing some of these supply chain issues today. I mean, it's really suppliers are still trying to recover from what we went through in the pandemic. You also see things like port congestion, you see the Suez Canal getting blocked. It's really quite, across the board. So, now what companies are looking for is, solutions that give them that longer range visibility into, how do I better plan ahead for some of this? And so, when I started, it was, how do we reduce our inventory? And today it's more, how do I even get inventory?
Awesome, thank you, Kyle. And now to you, Ken, getting your perspective on this. You're coming more recently from business and we're living this. Can you speak to the changes Kyle is highlighting?
Yeah, sure. So I was in the industry for over 30 years, for sure. Just like you said, Kyle, what we've seen in the last few years is pretty unprecedented.
Yeah.
I think you described it real well. I'll add a few things though. It's not the first time we've seen these big supply chain shocks. I think about things I've dealt with in the past 2008 recession, the 9/11 attacks in the US, before that, the dot-com bubble burst. And then, for me, early in my career, I spent a couple years reacting to the collapse of the Soviet Union, which, seems like a long time ago. When it happened, it was, a big impact for a number of industries. Some it was a big opportunity, some it had a lot of competitive consequences. Inventory management was always key to working through that and pivoting the business. If you think about it as a supply chain practitioner, inventory management is always going to be one of the biggest levers you have to work with. And in instances in the past where I was either working through the challenge or coaching plants on how to work through the challenge, the approach was always generally the same. It's getting a real clear view of your current condition, creating a new design that got you to the target that would create the change the business needed, laying out the plan, executing it, and then sustaining it. So the lesson to me from the pandemic and these last few years is really, we'll never know when the next big supply chain shock comes. We won't know how big it'll be. We don't know what the root cause will be, but we always will know there'll be another one. That's pretty safe to say. And we always know that when that happens, it's going to take some degree of inventory management to reposition the business. So,
Thank you. Yeah, very, very interesting to hear both perspectives from both. Kyle, what are you seeing in the marketplace right now in terms of the supply chain issues people are looking to solve for?
Yeah, I think, if we think of kind of the different ends of the spectrum across demand and supply, starting with demand, we were seeing, a few years ago, kind of the transition to more, maybe companies were using a driver-based type forecast or, maybe like a moving average, very simple forecasting. Then there was a move into more, statistical type forecasting around different algorithms and finding best fits. Now what companies are doing are trying to take that to the next level. Everyone knows about, has heard about AI and machine learning. So there's a big boom in that area. I would say adding on to the AI and machine learning is, companies are also looking for things like correlational data. So, how are, maybe it's a company that's really affected by pricing or promotions, or, think of a beverage company that's really affected by weather. So starting to find correlational data to take that forecast to the next level. The other thing I'd mention here is that they're really looking to have better collaboration with suppliers. I mentioned in the beginning, the suppliers being backed out because of the pandemic. And Ken, I think you made a great point around, how do we better prepare for the next supply chain shock? I think it's really, really hard to plan for, a global pandemic, but, just to, how do companies figure out ways to be better prepared there? And part of that is, how do I have more open lines of communication with my suppliers, which is really important. So, those are kind of the two areas. The last thing I'll mention here is looking for more flexible type solutions. So again, Ken, back to your point about being better prepared, finding ways to better scenario plan for, disruptions like this, or, how do I make sure I mitigate risk if something like this happens again? So it's really, kind of that shift across both demand and supply where we're seeing some of those changes in terms of the needs of our customers.
Great. Oh, that's really great. And supplier collaboration is definitely a key importance. Ken, you're in a unique position having seen both sides, right? Both on the business and on the consulting side. What is it that caused you to look for a solution? And how did you make that decision?
So our business was going through, starting on a big transformation, and the CEO brought the leadership team together, and we started talking about some of the priorities for where we're going next. And one of the things we spent a lot of time talking about was S&OP, and how we wanted to make that a real strategic advantage that we had for the business. We already had a pretty good S&OP platform. However, we were clear there were some things we wanted to do better. We wanted to be able to look further into the future, some longer range planning. We wanted to do more around understanding risks and opportunities, how those were set up in the scenarios, and then study those, and actually spending time as leaders looking at the scenarios as opposed to, so much focus on just putting them together, assembling the data and stuff. We also knew we wanted to do more around the statistical forecasting, AI, things like that you mentioned. Those concepts came up. We knew we wanted to go deeper into that. Additionally, we had some of the leaders on the team who had worked with other companies previously, where they had solutions that worked with that helped support their S&OP, and so they spoke very highly of the benefit of that, and so it was easy to get to an alignment in that discussion around, let's try to do this for the business. I was the director for the global S&OP, so I got the charge to make it happen. And that was really how we got started.
Great. And then kind of just, tying onto that question, what was the root of the problem that you were trying to solve?
Yeah. So I'm thinking, wow, this sounds pretty tough, because I've got to look further into the future at more parts of the business globally, make it standard, bringing in industry best practices at a higher level of detail. And instead of doing it in weeks, do it in days or hours. No change to my resources. That sounded pretty tough. So as I thought about, taking that on, the obvious things were to look at, eliminating all of the waste out of the cycle that was possible, looking at the design to make sure the pieces fit together well, and then automation, lots of automation. So, that was really the way I thought about the roots of the problem and what we had to do. The one thing that wasn't clear to me though was even once we found the way to build this and had it implemented, what would happen 2 months in when we learned something new about the business and wanted to do it different? Would I be able to change whatever I had implemented to match this new thing? We had experiences in the past where we might bring in an IT solution and what you implemented would be what we lived with for years maybe. And so that was in the back of my head too. I didn't know the answer to that, but something I was thinking about.
Thank you. And anything to add there, Kyle?
Yeah, I think all great points, and Ken brings a really unique perspective of having gone through this, kind of selection process and really understanding, what are some of the issues you're trying to solve for from a business perspective. I think just a couple of things to add there, and I think what we're still seeing is a big dependency on Excel, and so. No matter the size of the company, no matter the tools that they're using, there's still that dependency on Excel. Ken, I loved your point about the flexibility of the solution. So you didn't know, once you implement this thing, your business could change in 3 months. Your business could change in 2 months. We're seeing that today. So we need something that's very flexible that can change or really adapt as business needs change. So, what we're seeing is even companies that have these great point solutions, they're having to consistently, download things to Excel and still use Excel to scenario plan and still do Excel to, have that flexibility. So, here you are with this, solution, but you're still having that dependency on Excel. The other thing I'll say is just a lot of lack of collaboration. And so, from my point before of, companies having to download things into Excel and use Excel, well, now you're recreating those silos that we're trying to break down. So, everyone has their own spreadsheet, they're doing their own thing. Really what we want to try and do is find that solution where you can better collaborate across the business and help reduce that dependency on Excel.
Yeah, I meant to mention that earlier, but the transition from Excel to email was for sure part of our challenge, because you get, like you say, that tying the organization together and timing and versions and errors, all of that just falls right into that world. Absolutely. Yep.
Yep. And then I guess kind of going more into Anaplan, Ken, if you could share us a little bit about your story around that. Why Anaplan?
Yeah, sure. So we were looking at a number of different solutions. We wanted to be real objective about how we approach this. There was a couple incumbents, softwares were used in-house. We wanted to look at a few others just to have a good perspective. We picked Anaplan off the list from Gartner, and we dug into the evaluation. And I pulled together a team of about 20 people, supply chain ops, finance, IT, commercial, and together we went into it. And what we saw early on was interesting and a little different than we expected. All of the solutions we're looking at were above the line in terms of functionality for S&OP. Everything we looked at could do it. I guess it made sense. All of them came in around the same cost. So the solutions we looked at had different licensing and fees and things like that. But when we added up the purchase cost, all about the same. And then the biggest surprise was around data integration. Whether it was something totally new to us or something that was part of an existing stack, all of them required data integration. So none of those checks really gave us a clear indication. The really interesting part was what happened when we got to the demos, though. We had given all of the solution providers, a vision that we had developed and scope details, examples, data. And say, hey, I'd like a demo to see how you would handle this type of situation. In the Anaplan demo, I had my whole team on. We went through the demo, went pretty well. They showed us the things we had asked for, and we got done, and we started debriefing on the call with just my internal team. And I'm making a list. I'm facilitating the call, making a list. We like this, we like that. This is good. Went through the list. And then at one point, someone said, hey, Ken, I don't think that was real. Everyone got real quiet. And so what do you mean? And he said, I think they just mocked up some screens, and I don't think the software was really working in the background. So it's still pretty quiet. And I thought for a little bit, and then I got on my phone, I texted Anaplan and said, hey, can you guys get back on? We want to ask you some more questions. And so Anaplan got back on, we all got back on, we went into the demo again. This time, when we would look at certain parts of the data move-in, we went deeper and we said, hey, show us how you made that happen. So they'd open up a module and they showed us a formula, and we could see the data moving. And we said, hey, let's change this formula. So we changed the formula, it worked. Let's add a variable. Let's put that variable in the formula. So we're testing all these things. Everything moved like we would have expected. We changed the user interface, changed some of the visualizations, everything worked. And at the end, it was like, wow, this is real. It was real. So, so that was really interesting. After that, it was a few things were super clear. It was clear that, it was clear how the work was done, and it was pretty easy. Just the way you changed the formulas, the way you configured the tool. It was clear to us that we'd be able to implement what we wanted in terms of our business process design the way we wanted it. That was really important to us. It was clear that in the future, if we wanted to be able to change kind of post-implementation to match some new business need, we'd be able to do that, because now we understood really well kind of the flexibility. And then the last thing that was clear, and this is the first time it really clicked, was Anaplan would talk about being a tool owned by the business as opposed to by IT. And so we kind of got that now, because we could see what that meant, for us being able to change it. So that was really the big shift for us in the process that got us there. It was pretty fun to go through.
It's my favorite part of that story is, we don't think this is real, right? Like this was completely mocked up. And I'm sure a lot of other people going through this, type of selection process probably feel the same way. Is this just, demo ready, or is this the actual real thing? So it's really cool that, and Anaplan was able to come back and, kind of pull back the curtain a little bit and show you how everything works. So, but yeah, absolutely love that story.
Thank you for sharing. And now I guess to both of you, a question. You've both been through this journey as partner and client. What other advice for someone in this position would you say to get ahead of the issues?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I guess I can start here. And I think, really, I think step one is how do you better align to your business process? And like, I don't think it's saying that you have to have every single piece of your supply chain figured out going into this type of implementation, or even, looking at a possible solution. But, what are some of the big things that you can start to get consensus on? So if we're thinking of like a demand planning project, getting consensus to say, we're going to forecast at the SKU level, with a customer, and weekly time buckets, some of those larger decisions, how can we get ahead of some of those things? I would also say, start to plan out what your team internally is going to look like. And Ken, I'm sure you went through this exercise, and it's just as important, the partner you select, what does their resourcing team look like? It's almost more important, what does your team internally look like? So, who's that champion that really owns that vision that's going to be that escalation point? Who are our subject matter experts? Who can we select from IT to help with, support this undertaking? I love your example, Ken, of, when Anaplan came in, or, all your vendors came in, you checking on, we like this, we don't like this, this is, what we want to, see in the future. I think that's a great exercise too, to really, kind of start to vet out what your requirements are going to look like, and then ultimately what the tool in the future is going to look like. I don't know.
Yeah, sure. So a few things. To get ahead, this was our first time really for most of my team, and I had the good fortune that our leaders helped me get the A team, like the greatest hits across the organization. So I felt real thankful for that. And we were good students who wanted to do a good job. We spent a lot of time up front working on just the alignment around the vision and scope of what we wanted to do. That helped in terms of aligning with the leaders and making sure it was meeting their interests, but also when we went to talk with the vendors, here's what we want, and so they could understand it really well. So I think that investment was really important. Another thing that we did to get ahead of it was look at our data. So even several months before we started, we knew of some places that were going to be challenges for data, and so we got some plants active on that, and that helped us close some gaps and get some momentum even before we started. In retrospect, we probably could have done even more in that regard to get up front, because data still was a challenge as we kind of paced through the implementation. I think the last thing that was important and I'd really recommend is around change management. So we spent time talking about the vision and getting aligned, and then we leveraged that in reaching out to some of the future users, globally. Talking, here's what's coming, here's what it means for you. What concerns do you have? What questions do you have? All of that. What barriers did we see? That was something I think was really helpful in the early days to get the organization to understand about what was going to happen. And interestingly, as we went through that, we had a pilot that we were planning to do. We had another plant that raised their hand and said, "Hey, we'd like to be in the pilot also." So we got some volunteer participation to help us with the startup, and that was great. But that was like data. The change management was something I probably could have spent 5 times as much effort on up front, and it would have helped. And so I would really ask or suggest that anyone starting on this would keep that very deliberately in their plan as you get started.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great point. I think change management is one of those things that, some folks maybe tend to overlook as you're getting into these type of things, right? Like you think about, what are my dashboards going to look like? What's the functionality of this tool going to look like? But then you have to remember, you actually have people that are going to use this tool. And so, it is a big change, going from maybe Excel into, a solution like Anaplan. And so, really I think the point on change management is spot on. It's, one of those things that's maybe not a little bit of an afterthought, but it is so important when you think of these, kind of large transformational projects.
Absolutely. All right. So thank you guys both for sharing your insights, your background, your perspective. Now I want to open it up to questions. And so we've already had one submitted. So I will just direct this to you guys both. Where do you recommend starting if you're considering a supply chain transformation?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, one of the terminologies you hear a lot in some of these, transformational type projects is the crawl, walk, run approach, and maybe a little bit of an overused terminology, but I think it's really, really important here. And so, kind of my recommendation would be is find, start small and find something that is your kind of biggest pain point or issue, and focus on that to start. And a couple of things that's going to get you a really quick time to value. So, you're going to have, be able to solve for this, kind of major pain point or issue right away, or not right away, but early on in the project. And, that's a couple of things. I mean, number one, you're getting value out of this tool early, but then also you're starting to build that hype internally, that, that, hey, we solve for this and this in a number of weeks. Imagine what else we can do with a tool like this. And so you start to build that hype, across the supply chain, but across the business as a whole. And so, it's hard to say, start with demand planning or start with MRP or inventory planning. It's really, specific to the business. I would recommend find that kind of initial pain point and how can we get that quick win internally to build the hype throughout the organization.
Yeah, I like the crawl, walk, run. I think how we took it on, again, for us kind of first timers, we started maybe more in the middle. We limited our scope to a subset of the locations that were going to be in S&OP, but we still took on most of the functionality in that. And so I think there was an advantage of scale to some degree in how we did it. But in retrospect, if I could do it again, I would go back and pick some smaller chunks to do the crawling and get some early wins and earlier value points in it. Just to keep that momentum and excitement up and to see the value. I think I could see that kind of accelerating the effort just with the energy that, that the wins would create. So that'd be something I'd do different.
Yeah, and I think even something you and I have talked about before is you go through these implementations, you start to learn more about the tool too, right?
Right.
What are some of the additional functionalities or visualizations or things that I can do? And, if you start smaller and start to expand out, you're just going to have that much better of an idea of how do I maximize this tool or optimize, this solution that we purchase. So I know that's something that you and I talked about is that learning as you go on the journey as well too. I think it's important here.
Okay, great. Well, no other questions at this moment. I do want to just thank you, Ken and Kyle, for your time and providing your insights. Thank you, everyone, for attending our live Fireside chat. We hope you gained valuable insights from the content shared. After this, you will receive a thank you email with a link to the recording and details regarding our next webinar, where Ken and Kyle will also do a live demo with an Anaplan. So you can see how supply chain organizations can utilize Anaplan's connected capabilities. So look out for that email and we hope to see you next time. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.